Yeah, studied both things. I mean, I started in architecture, and then in my second year, that's when I met Jeff, and then we formed PlayLab, and then moved in together for my third year. And he finished in architecture, and at the end of that year, I switched to graphic design, fine arts, and I graduated in graphic design in 2 years, and just kind of got out quick and started PlayLab
Whoa.
immediately after school.
I got you. Okay. From what I understand, there was kind of an early interest in architecture for you, and
Oh
you
yeah,
you went to VA or Virginia Tech rather for
yeah.
architecture. What was the motivation for switching it over to graphics?
I think there's a couple things. One was sort of like a life thing. Virginia Tech is one of the best undergraduate architecture programs in the country.
Yeah.
Still is, hands down. But is extremely rigorous. And, our professors really preach to this, hey, it's architecture 24 hours a day or nothing. And I remember my first year professor, Jay Stokel, RIP, he said, he was like, divorced and sad and like smoked 20,000 Marlboro Reds a day. And he said, one day you're going to have to make a decision between architecture and your family. And and then at the time, the Louis Vuitton documentary had just come out by his son, who was like,
Hmm.
the third found out secret family. And I
Yeah.
was just like, I was 19. I was like, fuck this bullshit. I came from a great family that, you know, loved me and gave me extreme privilege and opportunity to do whatever I wanted to do in art. And I was like, well, graphic design seems fun. Like, and literally there was a silkscreen studio in Berkshire Hall that nobody had used in like 10 years. So Jeff and I went back in, rehabilitated the silkscreen studio, and I became obsessed with the sort of like ability to produce quickly. But we had already envisioned out PlayLab. Like we were like, we want like this contemporary Charles and Rains office. So I need to pursue graphic design. You need to pursue industrial design and architecture, which he did. He got a minor in ID, and then that was the thing. Like between the two of us, we'll divide and conquer, and we'll form this group. So that was the thought. But also the thought was architecture is not limited by whatever school says it's going to be. So we're like, well, we're going to end up doing architecture anyways, which we obviously have. So and are ramping. So it was just sort of like, fuck it.
I mean, there's a couple of different reasons you listed, and I think they all make a lot of sense. I think first, it's an interesting observation that you had at that age, and what people were preaching, teachers were preaching, that you're going to have to choose. This is a rough profession, but not only within the profession that it is difficult. I'll give it that for sure. But there seems to be an acceptance among certain faculty and architects that, well, this is
Yeah.
the way it is, and this is what it's going to be. So
Yeah.
deal with it.
Yeah. Which it's not. I mean, that is how the profession is, but it's not to say that that shouldn't change. And I
Yeah.
think as we've grown the studio, I mean, we incorporated in '09, but started obviously way earlier. We've been doing this professionally for 12 years. And the thing that we care about is this studio. And we can't control anybody or anybody's behavior or any other thing outside of us. But what we can control is our own day to day and our experience, the projects we take in, how we pursue initiatives, that whole thing. So as long as that is okay, we're okay. So we keep that very sacred,
Yeah.
and there's never a point where we're like, I'm, on this interview, I'll like say some shit that I just thought of in whatever moment we're in. But generally, like PlayLab doesn't take a position on anything. It's like, we're not trying to tell anybody how to be. We're just trying to be ourselves. So that's like I think the key
Yeah.
for us.
That strikes me as also being a smart way of doing things, especially I think in this kind of, call it a political climate that's been happening in the last, I don't know, probably 4 to 10 years or whatever it's been. I think it's hard to do that sometimes, I feel like, though, right? Because there are a lot of external influences and there's a lot of pressure, I think,
Totally.
for whatever you say becomes, people take it as being the defining, a
Sure.
commandment.
100%. I mean, I think, I was having this conversation yesterday because, when we started, we're young and naive, and it was about, the pursuing of the unknown, which it still very much is. And we do believe in the power of art because we consider this an art practice in studio. But it's not even as the world's changed. The world's always been fucked up. And it's just, we're becoming illuminated year after year of the realities of the world, especially 2020. And so as two extremely white co-founders of this studio, we now know that we have an extreme privilege that we have to examine every day, every week, every month, every year for the rest of our lives as the studio exists. So now the hard work begins, which is, how does this studio become a place of access and opportunity for everyone else that doesn't look like us? And that is the hard work. You know what I mean? So we're working on that. And we also are not saying we're perfect at it, but I think, to your point about quote unquote political climate or social climate, it's like the responsibility of this office, I think, is greater than we imagined getting into it. Not to say that, art for art's sake is wrong. We do believe that. It's like Christo and Jean-Claude, which is like maybe beating a dead horse in terms of a reference, but whenever asked over their career why it was worth pursuing a $20 million project that would be up for 2 weeks, they would consistently say, because it's art and it's beautiful. And there's a place for that in this world too. But I think the way that you do projects, the way that you talk to people, the way that you involve people, which is the thing that you can't see on Instagram, that is the magic of a place like this place, which is, a continual dedication to that and going through failures in the process. Yeah.
I think that's really well put. I think it's totally correct. I mean, I think it's also fair to say that you said you started PLAYLAB, in 2000, or it became incorporated in 2009 rather, but it started, a few years before that. So, I mean, between that time, 2005, 2009, whatever, around that range to now, I think a lot of people in the art, architecture, and design spheres were socially conscious. I get a sense that you guys probably were at that time too, but certainly in the last couple years, it's just become much more solidified and like crystallized. It was always existed, I think, in a lot of our minds, but more as a fuzzy thing. But now it's like really, really, really real.
Yeah, it's now, and also polarized. And it's an interesting time. But the studio, we founded it, incorporated in 2009. That year we went to Alabama with a one-way ticket to open up a pie shop that we created there in Alabama, which that whole thing was an investigation in access, the whole thing. And still to this day, and Plus Pool is equal to that, but just on a greater platform. But that we founded with Dong and Juan Stanescu in 2010. And that approach was, okay, well, how can a piece of civic architecture actually be a symbol for all, which is, it's a myth, it's naive, it's idealistic at best, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible or shouldn't exist. So the 10 years we've been pursuing Plus Pool, it's been, an investigation in how to accomplish something like that properly, which is not easy. And, we're failing at all the time, but everything from, I think we had a lot of conversations with a lot of architecture offices early on, which was, how many architects spend time developing community around the people that will end up interacting with the building before it's built? And that's rare, right? That's expensive. It takes a lot of work. It's doesn't necessarily always feel rewarding. And so just building a swim program for kids, that wouldn't otherwise have the access to have high quality swim lessons, that is a sacred and beautiful thing that we're also not getting right all the time, but it's one of the things that makes the project extremely magical.
Yeah. Plus Pool. Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
No, is it? Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, Plus Pool has been on our radar for some time. We had Dong on the show, again, I guess this was like 4 years ago or something weird.
Yeah.
We chatted briefly about it with him, and it's fascinating for a lot of reasons. And the public space component is huge. It's really, really huge. You know, and there's an environmental component as well. It seems like, so actually I did have kind of a funny question regarding Plus Pool, because that project was birthed in what year was it birthed? The Kickstarter and all that?
It was birthed in 2010. Dong approached us with the idea and asked if we wanted to help kind of inch it forward from like an idea to not even reality. It was like as Dong says, like it was launched as a lark. It was a case study that we worked on for a few weeks and then posted on Facebook, and then it kind of took off. And then we were all kind of what do we do now? And just working crazy. And then in 2011, we launched the first Kickstarter.
Gotcha.
And it became a real thing. And in 2015, we formed a nonprofit, and that's when it became extremely serious. But yeah, that was you know, Dong and Juana and Jeff all kind of exchanged time at Rex, Joshua Prince Ramos's office. And, you know, Dong, you know, such kind of like a kind and loose dude. He, you know, when he approached us with the idea, it was sort of like, oh, this, of course we're dumb enough to want to work on this together. Over time, we didn't know that it was going to be 11 years, but I think the thinking was so much in line with what we were thinking about in architecture school and the foundation of PLAYLAB, of like, it embodied all the things that we wanted the world of art, design, and architecture to look like for us, right? You know, branding and graphic design and programming and architecture and an environmental mission and a social mission. It was naive, and that's why it's very hard to do.
Yeah.
You know, I think like when we launched, it was like, you know, Dong and Juana's renderings were so great. People were like, oh, is this real?
Yeah.
A, or B, it's going to be built this year.
Yeah. When is it opening this month?
Exactly. And so, yeah, and that's a whole other set of challenges, the public and reception and expectations and managing that. And that's why it's, you know, so intense, but not all of our projects are that extremely large. So.
Yeah, sure. So I was going to ask them with Plus Pool, it is a massive undertaking for all the reasons you listed, finding sponsors and all the different agencies involved with doing something like that, which really hasn't been done before. But was there ever a moment, like, I don't know, maybe 5 years in the process when things were getting real, that you thought maybe we can hand this over to someone else to kind of take care of, I don't know, let's say the more administrative stuff? Because there's a lot. Yeah. I mean, I don't think people realize the amount of behind the scenes effort to try and coordinate and be the center point, the center person, the center agency firm between all the different other agencies, the sponsors, the governments, and all the people. Like, did you ever think, like, you know, I'm doing 5 meetings a week for this thing. Maybe we got to figure out a way to outsource this or someone else to take care of this part?
Yes.
Okay.
And still do.
Yeah.
It just sort of like when, after the second Kickstarter in 2013, we built this thing called Float Lab in the river in Hudson River Park. And that was so massive. And I think there was this realization. I remember this conversation Don and Jeff and I had at a pizza shop, and Jeff was like, this is a full-time project.
Yeah.
And I think Dong and I both similarly were like, no, it's not. But again, like, just so early and so naive. I mean, we knew that it was a lot of work, but I think we just didn't understand. And then it was Josh David, co-founder of the Highline, that told us, like, you need to create a structure. And he built the Highline, so he knew how to fundraise for that, what the political strategy was for that. And he was like, this will not be a thing that a brand just pays for, this, or a developer. This will be a city initiative, and you need to build a nonprofit. So we took that advice and we ran with it, and we hired this woman, Kara Meyer, who's now our managing director and has been with us since 2014, 2015, who's essentially been extremely responsible for pushing this thing forward in every way, in addition to an incredible rotating cast of directors on our board that donate time and dollars to pushing this thing forward. And it's a learning lesson every year because it's so unlike the Highline, and there's a technology component which requires permits that currently don't exist. And that whole piece of it is it's a full-time job, but it also is expensive. So it's not like it is us that are doing it, and staff and the board. But there's a moment now this year where the gear is shifted, which is exciting. And so Jeff and I, are running PLAYLAB full time in LA right now. We're not on staff anymore. We're helping out as advisors, as are all the co-founders. And the effort is about to become pretty complex, more so than it hasn't been in the past, as it should, which is exciting.
Well, I think that's a testament to both of you guys that were involved with from the very beginning to stay with it, and also to convince others of the vision, and a testament to the project itself, right? I always felt like if the project sucked, it wouldn't have gotten this far. Like it just wouldn't have.
I agree. I think that too, we're big team and friendship people here. And I think that, the project is a positive project. It's literally a plus symbol in the water as Dong designed it. And that is a powerful symbol. And we understand that. And the project is meant to be positive. And so I think every time there's a roadblock, even if it's extremely painful and difficult, the team, which feels like family at this point, which ironically was the name of Dong and Wanna's practice when it started, is the glue that keeps it together in some capacity. It's these things are not easy, so it requires that continued naiveness.
Yeah. It's interesting because with a lot of your guys' work, Plus Pool included, the what is it called, the Grown Up Flower projects, and PLAYLAB, right? The pies in Alabama. There's always, it seems like one of the themes throughout a lot of the work is a public component, and a component that's addressing the public, and a lot of times public spaces, and a lot of times also a conversation about social equity. I was wondering, where does that interest come from for the two of you, or for you? Because if we go all the way back to, let's say, you're a second or third year person in undergrad, there's different paths that a lot of architecture students go down. And certainly there are ones that kind of go heavily towards the sleek, aesthetic, formal, seductive route, and that's like their thing. And there's a wide range of options or paths, but you seem to be very interested in this kind of these public questions. Was that always clearly one of the big interests for you?
No, not necessarily. I think that's just probably a natural progression and investigation of ourselves. And still not doing it incredibly well, but want to. I think that Jeff and I, as a lot of our colleagues, are heavily inspired individuals by things we see out in the world, things that we can see relatively free or have access to. And with the internet, you're finding references of things you just every day that you didn't know were possible or that existed, slight twists on things. And it's those larger scale projects like Jean-Claude and Cousteau or James Turrell or the earthworks artists of the 60s and 70s that made things that were large gestures. And I think that for better or for worse, I love big gestures. And I think that there's a practice of gesturing, which is nice. And I think, Grown Up Flowers, that was a commission by an organization on 6th Avenue in Manhattan. And the brief was, can you make art for the avenue? We self-assigned flowers because of two reasons. One, we wanted to do large scale public artworks and felt like any rite of passage for any artist was to make flowers of some form.
Yeah.
So that was just sort of like the joke internally. And then the other thing was that there isn't a lot of like concrete jungle. There isn't a lot of like, grass and, private spaces, public spaces privately owned in most of uptown Manhattan. So they're not going to prioritize park space, for instance. So we're like, well, the joke and the fun thing is like, well, we can make 30-foot inflatables, so we'll go with the inflatable route. It was more of like form follows function on that one. And I think that, it's like the day we opened it, somebody came up to a sculpture and goes, whoa, did you see this Jeff Koons sculpture? And Jeff and I were standing next to each other with the studio, and somebody goes, oh no, it's Jeff Franklin. Yeah, I think it's like, I think we like people, and we want to believe in people, even when it feels like there aren't a lot of good ones. And yeah, I think that, especially like the work that we are privileged to do with Virgil Abloh and Louis Vuitton, like those works are equal to those other works, because the public film perspective of these runway shows are packed with nuance that are complex and rich. In the development of those projects are nothing but complete joy to do with the team. And the product is always a result of working with somebody that is extremely empathetic and driven by people and puts his money where his mouth is. So I think we're realizing, and I think pleasantly happy, that work can exist in multiple forms in ways that we just didn't fully understand when we were 19. And we want to investigate that further. Like, I'm 36 years old now, and I feel young, but when I say 19, it's like I'm getting to the point where half of my life, Jeff and I have been making work together as PLAYLAB. Like, next year will be half of my life, Jeff's and my half of my life. So what does the next 50 years look like if we are consistent and kind and patient and listen to others and own our own mistakes and grow from them? I think that, that's where I'm at mentally. Obviously, it's like exploring that. And it's also pertains to the studio, because the studio environment, the studio is the project. The projects are important, but they're not as important as the studio. The health and the conversations and the journey of the individual members of this practice are paramount. So what we can do together is the journey, and questioning it and prodding it every morning when we sit down together. What's on deck? What are we working on? And what have we not yet thought of and envisioned is the ongoing conversation, which is the engine that drives it and keeps it moving.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are great insights, and it's a good position to have. I will say that a sort of similar kind of perspective came to the forefront for the two of us, Marina and myself, when we started our own office, because then you're forced to ask a bunch of questions to yourself at the beginning of each day or each week that you don't have to ask when you're working at an office, because a lot of it's just taken care for you and just your journey's plotted. Yeah. Plotted. But so I get what you're saying, but also I imagine some of these questions maybe all became more present in your mind, again, because of the social climate, but also as the office grew. In the beginning, it was just the two of you, right? And at this point, you're not just two, there's a handful of people at the office?
Yeah, there's a total of 7 in here right now.
Oh, great. Yeah. At the same time, I do feel like that the both of you are pretty kind, caring, and cool people. So somehow I don't see a lot of these issues being, I almost see them not as a problem for you guys, because I feel like your office would be a great place to be. I don't feel like you're assholes in the office. I feel like the work you're doing is questioning the right things. And so you're talking about improving on what you've done in the past, but I guess from an outsider's perspective, it feels like you guys have been hitting the mark pretty well, though.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we don't really look back, or, the day is the day. We're focused on the things in front of us. And I think that, diversifying this office is of utmost importance.
Mm.
Number one. And I think the more perspectives we can have in this office, the better. And so that doesn't happen overnight. It's not like not every day is there an open position at PLAYLAB. We grow very slowly and sustainably. But we're prioritizing that right now, and we're prioritizing the decisions we're making with projects in a way that we weren't before. And we're prioritizing our, philanthropic work, the work that we're doing not because somebody's asked us to do, but because it's something that we believe should be done.
Right.
And that we could be somebody that does that. So I think Jeff and I have always architecture school, I think for most architecture students, it's a make or break thing, right? You go and you like it or you don't like it. And Jeff and I loved it. Mm. And I think my point being is that it was so special to us that it is a requirement that this place is the continuation of that thing. In school, it's not real, but it is real. It feels real. And you're exploring things that change you as an individual. I mean, between the ages of 18 and 21, that's when your brain is pretty moldable. That's when your brain changes chemically, right? As you grow older, you become stuck. And whatever decisions you've made or unconscious biases you've had or whatever they are. And so we know scientifically, socially, et cetera, that we have to continue to grow and challenge ourselves. And it's it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing in the world. And it's the thing that plagues me. But I believe that's why I believe that this studio is and needs to be and always will be an educational environment. And that's not a cop-out. It's just saying we have to continually learn and grow and change and listen and ask questions and also fucking fail and be okay, because our failures aren't the largest failures, but they're enough to drive us to be better.
Right.
And I think when, we're positive people, so it's every day there's 10 things going on in the world that break your heart. Mm-hmm. And it's a constant battle to understand where you fit in to do something.
Yeah.
And it's also a constant battle to understand, your confidence in who you are as an individual and what you want to be doing with your time and where those two things meet, or where you have to step out and actually change yourself in your goals as a person. And that's the studio growth, right? Is how do we do that? It's a huge question. It's every day. And so it's an ongoing conversation at home. My wife and Jeff's wife, they've both been, the largest benefactors and proponents of this studio, because we did it for no money for a very long time. and still don't prioritize profit. And we go home, I have a 4.5-year-old son. I mean, we're talking about these things every single day, about how to be better human beings. And I think in concert with art, it's important. I think for me, you asked about me personally, where these things came from, or people in public. My uncle Jerry is and was a painter. And when I was in 5th grade, he gave me a Keith Haring autobiography and took me to his painting studio, and we listened to Nirvana Nevermind on the way. And I think I talk about this story a lot because it's extremely important, but that book I destroyed. I mean, literally, I still have it. It's literally broken in this. The binding is just busted in 7 places. The Keith Haring was this symbol for me. I didn't understand. I didn't even, until that book, that's how I learned about gay culture. I didn't even know. I had to learn it and investigate it and ask questions, and then find beauty in people and humanity and empathy and excitement. And Keith had this life, which was outer body. He believed that every line he made, that it would change somebody, that it had the power to change somebody.
Yeah.
And I remember this part, and later when I read Keith Harington's journals, and his agent or gallerist or whatever was on his deathbed as he was dying of AIDS, and he was like, "Stop drawing! You're devaluing every other work before it by making more and more and more. You're diluting its value." Huh. And he was like, "No, that you don't understand. This is what I have to do." And obviously, the power of those lines are transcendent, and what he's done for kids and culture at large. And not to say like that's our role, but like that's what I enjoy about making work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, it's right to like, be okay with, getting better at it and like challenging it. And also, like, Jeff and I have the most incredibly crippling anxiety. So this is how we work through it. If that makes any sense.
No, it makes total sense. And the big question I had, which you sort of talked your way through, was, how do you, I mean, these are really fundamental, but also huge questions to be asking oneself, every day. It depends on how often you check the news also, but every day or every week. And then in turn, how this affects the office and all the different ingredients that you mentioned. Do you have... assuming that you're handling it fairly well, do you have a sense of like anything that you do in particular to navigate these questions more successfully? Are there things that even life habits that you do?
I mean, I think like we're, the studio process for any project is like a heavily researched and referenced and discovery-based studio. We're trying to like find information we don't know and draw parallels to something that we're doing that change the way we're thinking about that process, especially like in the concept phase. So I think the trick of it, right, is, you may see something on social media, you may see something in the news, the Times, CNN, whatever. It's like, and everybody's shouting. So everybody's shouting.
Yeah.
And you're seeing, if you are tapped in at all, you're seeing 2 opposing viewpoints on the same side, or 7 opposing viewpoints on the same side. And I think that it becomes extremely difficult. And that's not like a Crimea River thing. It's just like, that's part of like, I think the privilege as I'm unpacking it is to constantly inquire and ask and be there. And I'm not always doing a great job of that. So I want to do better. And, so I think it's like the trick is listening and referencing, right? Is, among everything that's happening right now, with Asian Americans, with Black lives, and anywhere in between or around that, there's more. Yeah. There's always more problems and things that are crippling to the world. And it's sad, it's awful, and there's a role in it for me. And it's so hard to figure out. So CNN notification popped up, and there's this challenge to give back Native Americans the national parks. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I had just rewatched Ken Burns' America's Best Idea documentary. And we stopped it midway through, and I was like, why is this America's Best Idea? This isn't our land. But it's also like, so now, I mean, there's no answer. I mean, there is answers, but from me today at my desk, what do I do is the question.
Yeah.
And continually. And so now it's like, I don't know, like Reese Cooper is this incredible man that we're working with on a bunch of projects. And a lot of what the brand is doing is just encouraging people to be outside and take care of the outdoors and take care of the people that are taking care of the outdoors. So it's like visioning forward. It's like, okay, was the goal of Reese Cooper to generate so much that we can go ahead and buy that land and give it back? Like, right. That's where my head goes.
Right. Right.
And that becomes the move. And I don't know if that's the move, but like that's the investigation. And nothing I'm saying here is coherent really, but this is where our heads are at. And it's just, it's hard to figure out, and it should be hard. So it takes talking to people, listening to people, not talking over them, and then researching. And then it's a great thing about design school, right? Like design criticism any good designer takes the feedback that you get or the viewpoints that you get, and you filter in the ones that are relevant to what you're doing, and you filter out the ones that are not. It's your brain, and you have the power and the ability to look at things that way. And that's what we're doing. It's like a filter, and not always going to get it right, but the output is going to be ever changing as we work through it. And also just like, just not learning when you have to like explain things and not explain things, you know. We're learning that with Virgil, like the nuance of these shows, the collections, every action he makes, it's like it's under scrutiny 72 times a day. And he lays it out in the 17-page show notes book every time there's a show, and nobody reads it. So it's like, or people do, but you know what I mean? Like the people that are criticizing don't read it. So, okay, you know, you got to keep moving, because you're not going to satisfy everyone or fix everything. And that's not like a cop out either. It's just more of like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And then also own it, and then don't yell at somebody because they didn't do it perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. Again,
sorry.
No, it's fine. But this is the thing though. I think if you are a practicing designer and creative in this sphere, and you're doing work that has the potential to have an impact, which you guys clearly are, and that's how you view your office and what you do, and also you are open to these issues, like you'd have to be confronted with all the stuff you said. Right. And I think the interesting part, there's a lot of interesting things what you said, but one of them was that there's a research component in the process of a project, yes, but just almost like in life, there's a research and listening, having conversations and dialogue. But then I think because you're someone who produces things, your mind jumps to, okay, but what's going to be the outcome? So it's a project we do, but then also what's the actual effect it's going to have? And that's a different mindset from, let's say, I think people who are maybe solely in the research or the history, what do you call it? Like professors, I guess, right? But designers, like, they want to take action, and that's like to bridge the gap from research to action for the things you're talking about. That's where it's the mind fuck, because it's massive. It's
massive, and I want all the smoke.
Right.
So it's you know, I'm encouraged by big thinkers that take big action. I'm also encouraged by small thinkers that take small action. They're on the equal playing field for me. So, and this whole studio, and Jeff and Dylan and Peter and Gabriel and Anna, it's everybody's, and Andrew, we're all thinking about these things all the time. But yeah, no buts. It's just project after project.
Yeah. I mean, there is also the reality, as you kind of alluded to, of what did you say? Like, you have to keep moving, because at the end of the day, that's a poor phrase. When you're at your desk in the day-to-day, you have to do something. You can't just sit and ruminate or be lost or confused or whatever. There's some kind of action that has to take place. So this maybe jumps more in a straightforward way to the office. So, like, how many different projects do you guys have going on at any given time? You know, and I assume also the different projects help keep the flow.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, they ebb and flow, right? So some things are burning faster, and then sometimes, as Jeff says, especially right now in the past 2 years of the studio, you never know. There could be an email that comes in, and there typically is every day, that just sets it all off. So, and it could be an opportunity, it could be a fire that we're trying to put out, it could be whatever. And it's also like, all this to be said, like, as people, we love being in service to people. That feels good. And even if they're just launching a product or a brand, and we can be involved and help that go well and captivate somebody's imagination through the content or the strategy or the execution, we love that. So that is also incredibly important to us. But we have, you know, we have a thing called the daily every morning, 9:30 to 10, all staff. And I go through everything with Jeff that we're going to do that day, and any updates on anything that was going to come over the next few days or weeks or whatever. And some of those are just sort of like we talked about this morning, like everybody knows everything, right? But, you know, like today, it feels relatively light because we have maybe 8 things going on. But there are over 20 on deck, and some, like we're working on one runway show in London. We're waiting for the site to be confirmed before we begin concept, and that site could be confirmed any minute. And then you have, we're doing our first furniture commission for a brand, right? That's like this ongoing back and forth, process. We have initiatives that we're working on. We are doing a lamp. We're doing a music video for a rapper. We're doing a stage for somebody else. We're launching several websites. There's so many things disparately in the studio that everybody has to be able to shuffle and hop on this, put this on hold for a second, come back around, fast track it. The management of the studio is art to us, which is why we're hiring a studio manager. And want somebody that creatively thinks about it the way that we think about projects. But yeah, there's a lot of things going on here all the time. And that's why I get up in the morning.
Right.
I mean, I'm pretty admirative on how you guys can take on, those big questions and mission almost to each project you do, but also the different types of projects you guys work on. And you're not a huge office either. So, I mean, the level of skills and be able to juggle around with those different mediums and platforms and clients, it's impressive, really.
Thank you. I think that it doesn't feel that crazy here, right? It's like from the outside, you only see a few things. Like our website hasn't really been updated in 2 years. So none of the work that we've done in 2 years, which is the majority of the things we've done in a way, are not on the website. And then on Instagram, we only post a select few. And there's a lot of stuff. It's like PLAYLAB is an iceberg where you see this tip and then everything else you just don't see. Mm-hmm. And we keep it that way. We don't take photos of the studio. We don't, everything is relatively sacred. And there are so much that we're working on. And, but that being said, it's like we kind of put earmuffs and we limit our input sources. Mm-hmm. So we're not listening to other people about this studio almost ever. Mm-hmm. So it's very rare that we get somebody's perspective in this moment, because there's no articles on PLAYLAB really. There's a few friends that have written something or asked to write a thing, but there's no hoopla around it. It's it's the studio and making the things in the studio. It just feels like that. It's the thing is when we did the first Louis Vuitton show that we did, with Virgil for his third collection, we thought, well, it was magic that he even offered for us to do it. And I kind of was under this impression, well, let's just fucking enjoy this. It's the last, because this will never happen again. Mm-hmm. We'll never be doing another show. We're not, I like fashion, I like clothes, and I like the whole culture around it, but we're not the people that came from that world. So it felt like a back door. And that's why it felt triumphant, SS20, Place Dauphine in Paris, June. It was I cried and cried and cried when we watched that runway happen. And even in the music, even in the rehearsal of the music, and Benji B was, running this orchestra, and Virgil walked out and just you could see him overwhelmed with emotion because it was so simple and beautiful and powerful. And I just remember being man, this is it, and Virgil leaned up to me and Jeff and was like, we're not done yet. And the show hadn't even happened. And we're on our 6th show with V. And it just kind of it could also end today. And we have to be completely happy and honored that we got to be able to do these moments. But yeah, I think that my point being is that we're not expecting anything. Mm-hmm. We'd rather be surprised by things, and also not allow anything to define the studio, because it's truly an adventure. We value, we just did this collaboration with Fisk, a gallery in a studio in Portland, Oregon, run by this man, Bijan. And Bajan approached Jeff and I. He found us online in 2009, the year we founded PLAYLAB. And he was in school, and he asked to do an interview for school with PLAYLAB. And we sent him this weird kit of like a box set of shit we found at the Dollar General in Alabama when we were starting PLAYLAB. And we developed a friendship over time. And this guy has created an incredibly powerful, inclusive, empowering studio environment. I mean, it's an honor to have watched him grow, and we look up to him. And we just did a print for him, a very small risograph print that was led by Dylan in our office. We called it Art History Bouquet, and we took one flower from a diverse set of 30 artists, and made one single bouquet of everyone's flowers and took all their signatures, and that's the signature. Is like this collage of all their signatures. And there's 30 t-shirts being made and like a few prints. And that piece, that project literally occupied the same weight that Louis Vuitton or any other project in the studio occupied.
When you say
space, the time.
Okay. I was going to say, when you say weight, what do you mean by that?
Well, obviously they're different scales, so there's less production and time involved. But in terms of concept and process, it's not just like, oh, cool, let's do a quick print as a throwaway. It's the center of the office at that moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's the trick. Is like getting everybody riled up around these pockets of things at the right time to carry the ball forward.
Yeah. That's probably the joy of having an office and having people underneath you to try and figure out how to keep it all moving.
It only took 15 years.
I do want to talk about the Virgil Abloh runway experience, but before we get into that, you had mentioned in this last bit, about that you guys you certainly don't seek out to try and understand what other people are thinking of, or how the other people perceive your office and what it should be or what it could be and how it works and all those things. You had also mentioned that there seems to be almost an intention behind not releasing an overabundance of information about what the office looks like and how it works and et cetera. I'm going to guess that's intentional. Do you do it that way? And why so?
I mean, partially it's time consuming, but also, it's intentional. If I'm being honest, I think it's because we know it's subject to scrutiny, and those things we don't need to be subject to scrutiny. That's for us. It's literally for 7 people, and also the immediate network of colleagues, collaborators, and clients that we work with. Right, that is the secondary audience. The primary audience is ourselves, and then the recipients of the work, the audience that gets to see it.
Yeah,
and I think that the right people, you both included, that find us somehow, have seen something in it that they connected a dot. It's like when we started doing branding, we had no education in branding, but we understood branding as you don't slap lipstick on hay and make something that's, maybe not what it is, look like something else. Branding, which is still a complicated term to use, the power of it is you identify the thing that it is that nobody else is, and you make that extremely clear. You find the diamond in the rough, and you build a world around that thing, and you build bridges to it. You attract people to it based on truth, and that is more powerful, right? And so the key is working with and selecting the people that have diamonds there or are willing to find the diamond.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we enjoy about the practice, is that we know we're not perfect. So we just don't need to have the conversation with other people about why we're not perfect or why our square peg doesn't fit into your round hole. Mm-hmm. I care, but I don't care. If I care, then it's we're opening it up to too many things. What I care about is I have enough to deal with to solve this studio over the next 50 years. I got my work cut out for me. And I also have a healthy balance of time with my family, which is equally as sacred. So with my wife and my boy. So, you know, we have to keep the whole thing tight.
Yeah.
We have to keep the whole thing tight.
I think it's really interesting, and it strikes me as smart. It strikes me as smart for the reasons you mentioned, and it probably keeps you sane also amidst all the things. I think there's kind of a beauty, maybe, depends on the day. It strikes me, maybe there's like a beauty to it too. Like there's I don't know how this will translate, but, you know, at architecture school, when you're a student, there's that studio culture that's there. And at times it can be toxic, yes, but at times it also feels sacred. It feels like it's very close to you. And what happens in there, that's the inner circle. And, you know, when someone steps in the door, they're not from the class, it's like intruder alert. You know, you're a foreign person, doesn't belong here. And there's something beautiful about having that internal space that is preserved.
Yeah, I will say that as much as I'm saying it's sacred, the walls are permeable.
Sure.
Like the thing itself is an amoeba. It's constantly changing, and then the walls are permeable. So we love adjacencies that are, you know, weird, for lack of a better word, things that don't necessarily feel like they belong together. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we don't want to do the same types of projects. Just because we did this thing doesn't mean we're going to do nothing like that thing. We would rather like, oh, well, we see opportunity in that thing. And also the fact that like there's an open door policy here. Every single person that emails the office that asks to speak with us gets to. And that's been our rule since day one. And that is because we leaned heavily on that when we were doing this. And you know, 95% of the people don't write back to you, and that's okay because they're busy, they're not interested, that's fine. But the people that did, we found something powerful in that Keith Haring like attitude. And there's this graphic design office, Carlson Wilker, I talk about a lot because they laid out the path a little bit. They were like, this is what running a studio is like. And they wrote a book about it called Tell Me Why. And we called and asked if we could come, and they said yes. Like 19 years old, flew to New York for the first time, met Jan Wilker, and he is one of my closest friends to this day. And he just is just like a kind, like true. Shelty and Jan are like these true people, like kind, like they are who they say they are. If I wasn't, why would I say I am? And it's. I think that was just so super cool. And and also like that part of back into like the sort of like listening thing is that every single person that reaches out to the office that wants to talk to us, we get equally something out of that conversation. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's where diverse perspectives are coming in. And so, yeah, I think my point being is that it is permeable, and we want the access to be large and the center to be sacred.
Yeah. Yeah. And they sound maybe, you know, at ends with each other, but there's different kinds of publicness or engagement. And if we say like in the digital sense, the social media sense, that's kind of it's its own body. It's its own kind of weird way of engaging with people and things. Like you said, like what you publish through Instagram or your website, or Instagram more specifically. That's different, right? From getting comments and feedback via Instagram comments or whatever is not the same thing as an in-person meeting at all. And I really like the idea that you said that it's permeable, but if someone reached out or they found you or you found them, then there's some kind of, I guess, filtering, but there's some kind of alignment, even if on paper it doesn't look like there would be an alignment. There's some kind of alignment that you guys feel.
Yeah. People, you know, that's how you build and see and find empathy. So, practicing it, like doing it every day is the key. I mean, there's this amazing artist, designer, illustrator, James Victori, who lives in Texas, but he used to live next door to my wife and I in Brooklyn. And, we've been friends for a very long time. And in 2011, Emily and I were getting married, and he came to the wedding. But right before, he was like, "Are you ready for this?" You know, like, well, what do you mean? And he was like, love is it's not a feeling. It's not easy. It's something you have to take out a pick and axe and chip away at every single day. You have to wake up and run a race for that other person. And it like, it blew me away. And that analogy isn't just about like, you know, human romantic relationships. It's about friendships. And if one thing comes out, doesn't mean you go and say, fuck this person or whatever. It's a race, but it's a marathon over time. It's a climbing a mountain together. It's, you know, the analogies are endless. Ropes, belays, carabiners, you know what I'm saying? Like, and over time, it becomes very clear who the people are that are going to climb the mountain with you. And I think finding those people that's where like joy comes in, you know.
But going quickly back to, you were talking about different kinds of work, and I was wondering what percentage of the work that you guys have, or projects rather, is commission-based versus, you know, your own initiative?
You know, I think like we've always had an idealistic perspective that we would want a healthy 50-50 split. I don't think, we've never seen that. And I think too, the way that projects come in are different than they were before. But they're mostly all commissions at this point. And I think the beauty in that is that we've built a world around these projects that in the studio and the process that allows people to come to us, for what we do, how we think, how we do it, why we do it. So a lot of times the ask is, can you help us see what we don't see? And that's step one, like call it a 3-week sprint on possibilities or whatever. And we'll do that. And then we'll say, we're not going to tell you what it's going to cost to work with us in the future. We're just going to look at this moment, and then you can take this and run with it. Or, you know, you may find something in here you really want to pursue. And then if you do, cool, so do we. And then we can figure out how to action it together for whatever budget exists for it, which is why it's, you know, we don't grow large, because we're not saying, oh, we did that thing, now let's go get 10 more and streamline it. That we're not a quantity-based business at all. And we're a relationship and idea-based business. So we want to work on great ideas. And we also want to figure out where we fit in the best. And we're a collaborative environment. We want to work with other people and other specialists. We're good at a lot of things, and we don't want to be the best at everything. There's a beauty to all of these disciplines, and there's a nuanced approach to doing them. It doesn't mean like we don't make films. It doesn't mean we don't want to make films. We want to make films. As a very specific example, I mean, right now we're doing furniture. We're just learning it because we want to learn it. That whatever comes out of that, we don't know yet. The climbing a mountain analogy, we've always talked about it like we want to climb a mountain just so we can see where the other mountain is. So it's not about that mountain. It's like the furniture is great, but it's the process of working through something that complex, through manufacturing, production, costing, et cetera, and concept and enjoyment of an object, that drives us.
Yeah.
Do you find that the most, maybe the part that you're most interested in is kind of discovering or uncovering the process for each of those types of projects more than the actual result of what the project ends up being?
Yeah, because the result is just the result of those things, right? So, you know, floored by a comment I heard from Tom Sachs, the artist in New York, that had said, you know, he changed our perspective on this, because he had said, you know, we talk about 100% of a project. Well, the first 1% is the idea conception. That's fun, it's freeing, it's not scary. And then you have the tail end of it, the 1% of the time in which you spend launching it, which is like a fleeting moment. You press go, you launch it, people maybe like have an opinion, and then it's done. And then you're on the next project. But the 98% in between is what you need to look at as fun.
Right. And
I loved that approach. So, I mean, obviously in Tom Sachs' studio, 10 bullets, et cetera, the process of the studio, the way that you cut wood, the way that you sweep the floors, the way that you treat people, whatever. That's the studio. You would go to Tom Sachs' studio and work there because you wanted that 98%. You're not like so concerned, like, yeah, there are some moments that maybe feel bigger than others. Like, you know, Tom Sachs is a great example because he could have a moment where he's doing a large Mars installation, and then there's so many sculptures and activities and programming and tickets and all this stuff. And then there's a moment where just every week he launches a rocket in the street on Crosby Street or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and that's is equal to the practice as the bigger things. And so, yes, to answer your question, wholeheartedly, it's the process and the anxiety that drives getting to that idea. It never gets easier. As Jeff always says, it's always hard, and it will never be easy. And that's what it's like. That's the challenge. If we were just pressing go and activating staff on doing the same thing over and over again, there would be no enjoyment in it. There would be little enjoyment in it for Jeff and I. It's the collective studio working on solving something, even if it's just for beauty or art or fun. It's worthwhile to explore together because it's about the exploration of it, not the second it hit Instagram and what everybody says about it or believes without knowing anything.
Yeah.
Those things are just like it's not completely irrelevant, but more than often, they're relatively irrelevant.
Right. Baseless. They're baseless.
Or baseless. Yeah.
Is there things during those kind of like enjoyable design process that you guys do that I don't know, like tricks or silly things that you implement within the process to make sure that this level of fun and enthusiasm is still alive and just keeps going?
Sketching. I mean, we sketch. I mean, we don't go far without our pads. We sketch and then we pen up. I mean, it's very architecture school here. We sketch and we pen up and we vote. We put stickers on things and we argue the positions on those things and allow people to build on them. It's not a no environment. It's a yes and environment. And so that's a trick. And then Google Docs. Google Docs is great because everybody can have it. Everybody can edit it. We can build on it. And so that, between those two things, we do that quite a lot. And we also we're very fast at building decks. Like we build decks. It's just such a dumb agency studio thing. And by building a deck, we're encapsulating a thought very clearly and taking it seriously. So if there's a Google Doc and a deck and a sketch, you have a thing. And it keeps it in play. And it also keeps it moldable for the whole studio to have access to its development.
A quick note, could you describe or explain what a deck is?
It's like a PDF.
But I don't know if deck is a common term within the architecture community. At least it's more common within marketing.
For agencies, it's more of a thing. It's just a document that builds an idea. I mean, architects do it as well, right? When you send a concept to a client, whether you're presenting it and penning it up in person or not, it's often just a compressed or collapsed PDF of various pages trying to sell a thought or an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do that. So it's like, where is this coming from? And what are things we need to be looking at to situate our brains before we get into potential directions or concepts that could define the thing? And we just it's like a sculpture. Every project is a sculpture. So it'll start with a concept and we'll say, okay, it could be these 10 things, but they're all connected by this thing, which may be the approach. And the approach maybe is sacred. Maybe we get to a point where we say, no matter what you do with this project, you cannot peel away the layers of this thing. And if we build a world around this way, this thing, it could look these 10 different ways. And then in those different ways, there may be several directions off each one. And very quickly, it rises to the top. What are the most exciting? And whether it's internally, like an internal process or a process with a client or a collaborator, those decisions are driven not by trying to rationalize them or post-rationalize them. They're driven by what are you excited about in this thing? And the thing that you often talk about the most is the thing that we do, is the direction that we go down.
It's interesting because on the one hand, the process you described sounds fairly generic and straightforward and typical. You sketch, you put stuff up, you talk, and yet it's incredibly powerful, that process, and productive and fruitful in your guys' case, and you're able to come up with good things. And so I guess one question would be, almost like what's the special sauce there? Because I'm sure a similar process happens in a lot of creative places. But you know, let's accept the fact that the statement that what you guys put out is, you know, pretty interesting almost every time. You know, you don't really, again, miss the mark very often. Do you have a sense of, you know, what is that magic quality that's present?
I mean, without being too corny about it, I think it's the group mentality. It's like, yeah, Jeff and I have a part in it, and we're getting okay at running a studio, but again, want to be drastically better. It's involving the team and picking the right team, you know, and we have a stellar team right now, and it's due to them. They are responsible for the work as equally as we are. So, you know, Anna in our office, design director, Dylan, art director, these two are home run hitters. And, you know, as is Peter Deering in our office, Gabriel Chan is our first architect, you know, and we have a great cast. Andrew Kenny, this is his domain right now, commandeered for a minute for this. One of the most incredible image makers and retouchers in the country, you know. So these people collectively have equal footing in the creation of the concept or the execution of the thing. And oftentimes it's more about Jeff and I finding the right opportunities, garnering those opportunities, you know, directing things that we feel maybe are important, and then allowing everybody to challenge it, and then just clearing the runway for those people to run free.
Yeah.
Freedom is key. And if we need to push a deliverable or a deadline because something is brewing and we're not there yet, we clear it. And if somebody needs something, more resources to get to that thing, we give it. We find a way to have it. And we listen. We just listen. And if you're not trying, then that's a different problem.
Sure.
Or if you're not spending the time on it, it's a different problem. But if you're here and you're spending time on it and you care about it as deeply as we do, which all of these people do, then we've already done our job. So, you know, the joke here with Dylan anyways is that he came in as an intern, and now he can go have any job in the world he wants, because his resume is now, if he went and found another job, it's so long that he could confidently accomplish anything he wants to creatively. And I think that that's the education aspect of the studio. So if we can do it for Dylan, who else can we do it for? And that's when it gets really exciting. And, you know, the goal is to run a good studio and keep people here, but we also know this is Jeff's and my practice first and foremost. So we are going to be the ones here for 50 years. You are not obligated to, but while you're here, it's yours. And we have to figure out how to make it yours as much as possible. And that's when you see it in the work. The work is the result of these people.
That's a great philosophy. I am interested, kind of based off that so it was started obviously by the two of you guys. At what point did you start, excuse me, having employees or interns, etc.? And now you're at 7. I'm curious, like, what the timeline was, you know, to that growth, let's call it, and then also, what have you seen as being like the biggest challenge in shifting from being, you know, projects that you and Jeff did completely on your own to now again managing, and your role becomes a little bit different, and as you described it, it's more about creating opportunities and freedom. So, you know, what has that process been like? What are the challenges?
It's been very difficult, but it's also been only difficult in hindsight because you know, when you're doing it, you're getting older, you're getting more experienced, you're leveraging opportunities you had to get other opportunities. You know, man, I mean, 2009, just Jeff and I. It wasn't until 2014 we hired our first person, Jonathan O'Brien, who really was just an incredible friend and designer that we loved being around, that was more brilliant than most people we'd ever met. And we just needed him in the office. We wanted him in the office. So we didn't have enough work to have him in the office. So I don't even think Jonathan knows this, but Jeff and I didn't pay ourselves for a very long time. and paid him very little also. And then, but boom, we were 3 people. And it was, you know, man, that opened up a whole world of possibilities. And we had a few interns every now and then, but like, you know, we had one guy, Russell Flinch from Micah in Baltimore. He would drive up 2 times a week from Baltimore just to like work with us. And we like pitched crazy initiatives and ideas. We didn't work on client stuff. Had this kid, Nick Hum, come, who later went to like Pentagram and all these places, who like, you know, just worked on crazy zines with us. And we had this woman, Becca Pad, come in for an internship, and she painted. She like, at one point we were talking about the power of like the nutrients in elephant poop, and she one project was just to go to the zoo and convince them to get the elephant poop. And you know, there's so many of those stories. Nick Fogarty, you know, Olga Manina, this German girl painter, wrote The Office and was like, I want to come to America and I want to intern at your office. No experience in anything that we were doing. And we're like, this is great. So we had her come, and she just made art, and Nick made clothes. And so the semblance of freedom has been there since the very beginning. And even when Jonathan came, it was the same, but also heavily client focused. And we're doing a lot of digital work and websites and apps and stuff at the time, because we were trying it out. We wanted to see what it was like. And then it just kind of grew, you know, and it wasn't perfect, and making things up as we went. And now it's like the first semblance of like a true working machine, right, that is all the things that we wanted and embodied. And we can study this as a lab. We can study this format and be like, okay, well, what do we change? What do we want to make better? And it'll always be that way, you know? Yeah. That's what's fun.
It seems like also more on the personal side, like ego was never an issue for the two of you. Like, it's not a studio where it's my name on the front of the door. This is my sketch. Do what I drew, and you know, I'm going to tell you how it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, we have to kill that ego daily. But I think that just because we're human, but no, we try to and kill it. And but there's also a healthy balance of like, this is the collaborative practice,
sure,
of Jeff and Archie, and we believe we're okay at this thing, but at the very least, we believe we need to be doing it, and that we will be doing it for a long time. So that is where it's not like the buck stops with us, but it does,
right?
Both legally and financially, but not in ideas. Because again, if we've done the work to get you here in the studio, and you're the right person for the studio, then now it's yours too. And that, I think that's part of the active daily climbing a mountain that takes effort, because it takes trust. I mean, we made a zine with this amazing woman that worked in our office for a long time, Anya Sherbakova, and she helped lead this initiative in which we did a project called Friend Zone, where we just took screenshots of the moment after a football player would make a touchdown and hug the other player. And we took these screenshots and made a zine, shot after shot after shot of these embraces, because that is the symbol of what it feels like in the studio when you have a win, whether it's internally within a project or when a project launches. And so the zine we called Trust Each Other. And we named the Wi-Fi password the same, all caps, not capital case. And the thinking there is that there's no reason to trust another human being. But when you do, and you go through that, and it turns out great, there's nothing that beats it. And so if we can create an environment of trust where I can trust you and you can trust me, and I can show that time after time, and the results are in the pudding, so to speak, then that's the secret sauce, which is not novel. It's just hard and rare. we realize. I mean, we realize that very much so. But it is what is very special. And I think people, no matter how long they've been here, I think they continually are surprised of the level of trust. Mm-hmm. As we are too. But, and there's failure in that. And the failure is what makes the studio grow.
Of course, of course. The other thing I was thinking about is an earlier statement of you guys do a lot of different types of projects, and that you enjoy the process, you enjoy undertaking new things. And even though the process is difficult and challenging, and you don't really know because you might be new to it, it kind of struck me that it sounded like a drug addict, kind of. You know, sure. It's this thing that is arduous and difficult, and you know, it's new, but you keep returning to it every time.
It's a good drug.
I mean, you nailed it.
It's a good drug.
Yeah, it's a great drug. Thank God I have a therapist. It's a drug. I've described it as a drug before. It's a powerful, transformative thing. Again, and it's not for everyone, it's for us. And when you're in it and you feel it, it's like, you know, I cry. I've already almost cried twice in this call, this Zoom, obviously, but I cry a lot because it's like, it comes to the surface quite often because it's that visceral and that real.
It's funny. I think it's also interesting how you describe the office and how it runs as a project, maybe the project in a sense. In part because you guys are doing a lot of different types of work again. So I'm trying to think, in comparison to another design office or architecture office or whatever, they do one and it's successful. And as you described, they would repeat that again in some way. Same project type, same process, something is going to stay the same to be more efficient and then probably more financially lucrative and et cetera.
It's a business mentality.
Yeah, it's a business mentality. But in your mind, obviously you guys don't approach work that way. So therefore, as a result, it almost seems that as a result of that, the office has to be the project.
That's correct. And I think we've done good at business through it because of Jeff. He's treated the business practice as equally as everything else he does here, which is like a wizard. And it's learning by doing it, and we're continually trying to figure out smarter ways to bring money in the ways that align with everything that I've said here.
Right.
And that is hard, and but yeah, the studio is the project. I mean, I think about it a lot. We talk about it a lot in because there's no goal for the practice, which would make any other business person uneasy. It just doesn't make us uneasy because, again, I turned 37 this year. That means that half of my life I've been exploring ideas with Jeff. There's a level of trust that you can't describe or feel. You can only feel it and believe it. It's faith. It's a faith-based thing. So I have all the reason in the world to believe that the next 18 years will look like the past 18 years. But other than that, we don't have a goal, right? Jonathan O'Brien, the first person to work with us, he said, I would be happy if no matter how long I stayed here and however successful PLAYLAB is, that at 80 years old, we are on a porch in Virginia where we're all from drinking whiskey. And I was like, that's a business model, but it's like a business goal that you would find in a history book 100 years from now. And I think we're looking at things from that perspective. Jeff always jokes like he's following me with a camera, like he's shooting a documentary. He's like, what are we thinking now? Like the joke being like, we only think about it in context of like, what is the thing we're crafting as we're crafting it? And are we putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak, daily? That James Victory quote of like, are you climbing a mountain every day for this thing? And we have to do it in that way. So I think about it a lot in terms of like, any artist would want a show, an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art. But what does PLAYLAB look like in 50 years if there is a PLAYLAB exhibition at MoMA or the Guggenheim in New York, and it's every single person that ever worked here and everything they did while they were here on display. And it was somehow an invitation for that to be continued or open sourced or whatever. That's the sort of like mentality here, is what does that look like? Looking back on it in that perspective, well, we all die. No matter what I do today, I'm going to die tomorrow or the next. So the money, as long as I can take care of my wife, my kid, and myself, we're good. We're good. And money comes and goes, but everything else is more important every time. And history's proven that one. I don't have to prove that one. So we have to just continue that course. You know, not to say we're not going to take and make smart business decisions, but in the process of pursuing those things, we have to do this thing.
Because it's within you already, as far as what your interests are and probably who you guys are as human beings, but also because there's a level of faith involved, right? Because I would assume running a practice like yours is not always easily financially and not always stable, but you have, because of this long-term 50-year vision of this gallery in the future, that's the end goal in a sense, and so therefore you're accepting of, I don't know, bumps in the road along the way.
Yeah, because I look at Olafur Eliasson's practice in Berlin, 100 people, full-time chef, kitchen, cookbook, archivists, researchers, architects, designers, writers, you name it. Sounds great. I want that. I want it because it looks like a family. But I'm like you guys looking at PLAYLAB, I don't fully know how it works.
Well, you could interview him and then ask him all these questions.
It may not be as enchanting when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But from the outside, it seems really special. And I can see that happening. I can equally see nobody being here, us not having a studio, and it's Jeff and I in a desert in a one-room apartment doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference, is that it doesn't matter. It matters because I really want to be around people, and I find that to be the success. Right? But if it scaled back down to Jeff and I, maybe it does someday. Maybe it scales back down just two old men attempting something together. That would be great too. And because it's our journey. And I'm good with that. If I went through this whole world with all of the crazy people in it, evil people, bad people, good people, in between people, all of it, and I came out with one person that I trusted, I hit the jackpot. So once you have that, why would you want anything else? That's how I look at it.
It's impressive, and again, it's like serious, major, heavy topics. But it's also no. It's
getting all emotional.
No, it's great. It's great because I think like you have to ask these questions, but it's tough because a lot of times these questions and conversations, internal conversations, like with oneself, it's hard to find the space and the time in the day to have them breathe and be kind of expressed in a sense. And I feel like a lot of people are sort of in touch with them, but they're buried amongst, all the day-to-day crap. And I think that's not healthy.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is also, we're not just here living our lives on Earth just to work, make money, and die. Like there is kind of a bigger role by being here and maybe listening to more what makes you happy and excited every day versus what society and everyone is telling you should be doing might actually be the best way to look at it.
I think so. At least right now, I think so.
At least right now, yeah. Subject to
tomorrow
change.
May change. Yeah. I mean, totally. And I'm willing for it to change, I think. But right now, this is what consistently feels right.
Is there any aspiration, I guess you sort of answered it already, but any aspiration to grow the practice? Like, do you see do you feel like 20 people would be a limit, that 7 people is a limit?
We don't have a number. I mean, the thing about Jeff and I is that I will go where Jeff wants to go, and Jeff will go where I want to go. And I'm the extremist and he's the conservative, safe one.
So are you the Ray Eames out of the two?
Not a great analogy because I don't think Charles was very great to Ray.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Think he was a bit of a misogynist. But that aside, which we don't support in any capacity, he keeps the boat safe and tempers. We're always in line with where we're going to go and vision, but I could have flamed and burned out 10 years ago without him. So because my mind's like, as Kanye West says, like a Tron bike, it's just going a million miles an hour, as is Jeff's. But I think, like I said, I love the idea of 100 people. I love it, but I also love the idea that we just stopped it and became a school, or any other incarnation you could think of. I would love more people, but only as is necessary. But good people are hard to find. So if we could find 10 more good people and 10 other people trusted us with their things, and we felt like we could have involvement in those things as the thing scaled without feeling removed from those things, I feel okay. But I used to think that I had to be involved like intimately in every project in the exact same way. I don't feel that anymore. I feel like, there are certain projects I spend more time on than others, but really it's about building the studio and creating the environment that is everything I've described on this call. So I believe that can produce scale, but scale is not the goal. It's just like a product of whether or not it feels right at the time. Like we're hiring 2 positions right now, and it's because, okay, there's a few things in play that meet both the ambitions of the studio, the goals of the studio, and then the trust that somebody else is giving us. And it feels like, okay, we can do this. We can take it another inch. It's like juggling, right? It's like you can have 3 balls in the air at some point, but bringing in the 4th is always awkward, and then you get good at it, and then you don't feel like you're doing it. So I think that's how we'll do it. We may only have 5 more people over the next 10 years. I don't know.
Yeah. You mentioned that in that eventual process, let's say that it is about finding the right people that are going to be working in the office for you guys, with you guys. And you place a huge amount of trust in the people you hire because that's who you are, but also I think because of the nature of the office and the work you do. I'm wondering, is it, how do I explain this? Like, how do you know if a person's the right person to hire?
It's a gamble.
Because it is a gamble. And I think an extension of that question is, you guys both taught for some time, and education is a term that's come up in this call. Do you kind of view yourselves as teachers of your new hires or employees in some way?
We don't view ourselves like that, no. And I think, it's so hard. You never know. And also the office changes, and it's okay for it to change. So, some of it's changed sometimes, or at least educating on what we believe is the right technique or approach, or how many iterations is too many iterations, or how many is not enough, or when do you stop? When do you collapse it into a PDF? When do you sell it to me better than you're selling it to me now? All those things are going to be relevant for everyone. Some people have it in them more than others, and some other people have different things in them that you have to uncover that they don't even know that are in them. And so it's more of like, this journey. And so I believe, like, if you've made it through the gate, right, or it's like your email was good, your portfolio was good, your references checked out, the conversation we had with you was nice, we have another conversation that was really good too, boom, you get an offer. And we do like any other office, it's 3-month probationary period, which just is like a nice out for either side. If you don't feel like it's right, or we don't feel like it's right, it's no hard feelings. It's never happened.
That's a good sign.
What percentage of people leave after 3 months?
No. Well, we've never let go of anybody. Everybody's left us. So, it's sort of like we're willing to figure it out with you. but you gotta be really fucking good. You gotta be better than us. It's like, I don't like Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg, but he did say something once. It was like, just hire somebody better than you all the time, every time. Maybe that was paraphrased, maybe it was somebody else. I don't know, but it's a cool quote. And I think that that's like absolutely true. It's like all the people in here in some way, shape or form are way smarter than me or better than me. And I think that's what it's cool. You know?
Yeah, that's the fun part, right?
I know. I was a little bit curious. So how did you guys decide to move to New York after school? And how did you decide to then move to California after New York?
New York, we were, young and hungry, and it seemed like the place to go. My North Star was Keith Haring. Jeff's was Andy Warhol. That was, he was born in Martinsburg, West Virginia. And that's what he learned everything through, was through Warhol. And then he applied to architecture school. We met there, obviously, and were exposed to so much more. And so much of that was happening in New York. And we just thought, Brooklyn was the place. We had never been to New York. So it was like, oh, Brooklyn seemed cool. And we made t-shirts, PLAYLAB t-shirts that said Brooklyn is better. Like, it was stupid. You're young. And I remember they were on like Perry, like they were like powder blue t-shirts with yellow screen printing. It was so dumb. And we moved, and Jeff worked at Rex. I actually had a job for 11 months with Cornell and Columbia Universities doing graphic design for their medical colleges. Very strange. And then I took that salary money after a year, and we got a studio, and I think it was like $400 or $500 a month. Wow. And then I went in there full time in Bushwick, and Jeff would come in after being berated at Rex, and he would grab a pizza for us, and he would show up at the studio around midnight, sometimes 10, but mostly midnight.
God.
And we would be there until 2, and we just, making posters or talking or, but I had clients for the studio, and I just carried the burden of the office for probably a year and a half.
Wow.
I did all the work. Jeff would come in and do a lot of work too, but he was mainly focused obviously on Rex, and also taking so much information from Rex and applying it to the studio. Everything from file structures and naming structures of files to the process of concept. Josh is very good at bringing concept out of designers, no matter how senior or junior you are. And he forces you to claim a position on it. Like, you have to sell it to Josh. And so we would take these things and bring them to the studio, and we just forming the studio like that. And then our friends Mark and Dave had started a studio in 2009 called Dark Igloo. And I was like, yo, like, how did you do that? And they were like, well, we have an accountant. They set us up with the LLC. And then I emailed Jan Wilker, and I was like, yo, why did you pick Incorporated? And he was like, well, that's an S Corp. There's also C Corp. And, they were like, Inc. sounded better than Carson Wilker Inc. sounded better than LLC. So we was like, cool, it's PLAYLAB Inc. now. It was PLAYLAB, now it's PLAYLAB Inc. And we just didn't even know the difference. We know now.
Yeah,
it affects us much differently.
Yeah,
as an S Corp than an LLC. But it's fine because we're in the flow. But so yeah, we did that, and then he joined me. Jeff joined the physical studio 9 to 5 in 2009, and we incorporated with an accountant over lunch at a Starbucks in 2009, and on his lunch break, and then yeah, we were there, and, started Plus Pool with Dong and Juana, and it just was the place. We were building and building and building, and then as the studio was growing, we met a lot of people, and the work started changing, and we met a lot of people here in LA, and we were coming to LA quite a lot for one specific client. And that client had asked if we would move here. And that was the first time that we were like, no, we won't, but that's interesting. And then we had an office producer that ran the office for a couple of years named Ryan Simons. He's an artist. And he was like, one day he took us to coffee. He was like, I'm moving to LA, so I got to leave the studio. Sorry. And we're like, okay, well, we'll miss you. But also, why can't we move? And Jeff was like, we should feel as free as anybody. We shouldn't feel like New York's the end, not like anti-New York, just we should kind of expand the horizons. And so we started having conversations, and then, one of our close colleagues out here was like, if you want to move to LA, we can have a studio together and we can chase opportunities and make some great things. And so we took that on, and we had a client, Drake, the incredible artist and rapper. We had done a project or two for him and his team, and they had said, what would it look like for you to take us on in a long-term capacity and move to LA? And so we came here and are still doing that in the concert of all this stuff. And we also just wanted a change of quality of life. I think I wanted to be outdoors more, and Jeff especially, and we have that. We have like a nice quality of life balance. It feels slower, even though we're fast paced, and it feels just free and good. It has all the things we wanted for it to feel like. And we have so many friends and community members here that make it great. Reese Cooper's here among a ton of other people. And it just, it fits, and it makes so much sense. And Anna and Dylan moved out with us. We offered for them to come, and they were so generous and willing to change their lives to do that. And that also makes the studio like so much richer, because it is a family kind of feeling. You know?
Interesting. A couple of questions. The first, I wanted to get your take on how, you guys moved to LA not so long ago, but you've had experience with it beforehand, obviously. Like, what is your reading of the differences between LA versus New York, especially like after moving here or to LA? And did you start to feel that New York was stifling toward the end? Because we were there for some time when we left to come to California. And by the end of our time there, it was like, New York started to feel very restrictive.
Yeah, that's what it felt like for me personally. And I think that everybody has a different experience. I think that the magic of New York was beginning to feel a little lost on me. Mm-hmm. But that also was in concert to, I get on a train, I'm on this, rickety, loud thing in a tunnel for 45 minutes each way every day. It becomes really monotonous in a way that a car isn't for me, because it's like, I can talk on the phone to my mom, or it's like I can do anything and feel free, and you're looking at things and whatever.
Yeah.
And then the studio was just like train studio home. And then we had a baby in 2016, which, obviously changes your world. And it's just family and home, family and work, home and work, home and work, home and work. There's no, maybe I'll go to MoMA right now, or maybe I'll go to the beach, or, maybe I'll drive upstate. None of those, we did go upstate a bunch, but none of those things, it didn't feel as freeing for us. And in LA, it's like, it's just, there's an ease to that way of life. And it's still the same. It's like home and work, but it's in a different environment. And then like professionally, it's like, there's different types of work in each coast. And here there are a lot of people here that are trying to do projects that are more exploratory than the ones we were working, people were talking to and working with in New York. So and that changes though. It's like all those people are everywhere.
Yeah, of course. The other question I had was, basically the question is, how did you guys find yourselves collaborating with people like Drake and Virgil Abloh? Because there are a lot of people listening who are like, I would like that. I'm creative. I'm thirsty. How does that work?
Yeah. I think honestly, this is why we put so much stock into people and trust, is that it goes hand in hand and back to that conversation of, it's not overnight. It's like this layering and building of relationships and friendships. And then some of it's by chance, but, like Virgil's a very clear example. Like Dong and Wana introduced us to Virgil in 2013. They were working with him on Off-White, and we had launched in 2011 an architecture publication called Clog. Mm-hmm. And that's still in operation today. And Virgil loved that. Like, I think Wana showed him a few of the copies. Like, we had just done 2 issues, I think, Bjarke Ingels Group and Apple, the architecture around Apple. And he was like, this is so cool. And he was like, can I meet them? And then he came by the studio one day, which we shared with Dong and Wana, and he met us. And then we worked on a book that never got made for this first Off-White store that Dong and Wana designed. And they designed like 15 of them or something in Hong Kong. And we just learned to work with Virgil then. And then we just remained friends until we got approached to work on kind of a super team around his figures of speech exhibition in 2019, and designed that book. And then through several meetings in Paris, he was like, what about these shows? So it's like, that's the very like honest truth.
Yeah.
But all of that relates back to like, okay, Jeff went to Rex, met some people. Those people, we had shown that we had done initiatives, and Dong was like, oh, that's cool, plus cool. Like, I have this idea, and then we'll work on that. And then the relationship continues. So it all goes back to put yourself out there and then develop relationships with people, and then prove worth on those relationships by trusting them and then building trust in them for you. And every single thing I can trace like a tree back to those moments. And we talk to a lot of people. I mean, we obviously, we tell the truth. We say what we are thinking and what we want and what we want to try to do and how we're doing it. And some people come in the door, some people come in the door and come right back out the door. And that's just it. It's like, there's no smoke and mirrors. It's just, we've been doing it for 15 years or more. So it's just taken a ton of time to do that. Like our first client, like our real, like a client, like we both, 2009, we're starting the office. There's this amazing guy, Matt Spangler, who ran a creative agency in New York called the Happy Court for a long time, went to Tribeca Film Festival. Now he's like, one of the chief officers at Compass, and incredible mentor and friend and colleague and all the above. But, he was working at this agency. We liked the agency, would go to their parties. And then at some point I didn't know if we were going to like fully start PLAYLAB or not. And I applied to the agency, the Happy Corp, and the agency folded while I was interviewing. And I was like, okay, well, there's the sign. We're starting PLAYLAB, and so Matt called, like the agency had folded, and Matt called and was like, I need people to work on things with me. And he was one of our first clients, and he would just continually give us work. And I swear to God, there's no reason to give us this work. We had no idea what we were doing, like tons of it. And he just continued to come and give us work. And we just wanted to make him happy. We wanted to like show that we could do it, which just continues to drive us. And, since then, now he's like, the head of Compass, and he's doing incredible, and he's inspiring and whatever. And he's, he'll call me just to be like, man, I'm watching what you're doing. And it's like this moment, but it all connects, we rebranded, it was like a year and a half after we rebranded the tech company Foursquare. And that was this crazy project. We had never done something that large, and it turned out well, and it was crazy. And that came through Matt Spangler. He was just like personal recommendation, reached out to the CMO of Foursquare, and was like, I trust these guys. You should work with them. And there was no bidding. It was just, they're going to work with PLAYLAB now. And I think that happens now every time almost. It's like somebody was like, you gotta work with them, which is nice. And that's because there's friendships and trust at play in a big way.
Yeah. It's amazing. And there's certainly a high level of sincerity, right? They know what they're getting into. You guys are straightforward and honest.
Yeah.
I did want to ask...
For better or for worse.
Right. Well, it's going pretty good so far, it seems like. So we'll see how the next 50 years go, maybe. And then, I wanted to talk about the shows for Virgil Abloh, because you kind of remarked it in the beginning of the episode that I wanted to know if designing and working on and doing a project like that, if the pressures are different because there's so many eyes on it. And what does that mean? How does that feel like when you're going through? What does that mean for the process and for the project?
You just don't feel that. There's never even a thought. Actually, I've never even thought about that.
Oh, really?
Until you said it. Well, not in that way. Like it's an intimate WhatsApp conversation and Zooms and before COVID in-person meetings. And just, it's like architecture school with Virgil. It's like, he's one of the most amazing friends and thinkers and designers you've ever met. He's an amoeba. He's a permeable amoeba.
Okay.
And he is as interested in everything that you are, that you can't even possibly imagine. It's so light and so joyful, and the people he surrounds himself with are equally as such, that there's no sort of like weight or anxiety about levels or positions or success and he also he protects it. So it's like he doesn't make it so that it's like a lot of pressure's on this show, you know? And you're like, of course there's pressure on. Can you imagine being in that position? Like, I can't even imagine being in that position, having the weight of Louis Vuitton. But he treats it with this elegance and grace and investigativeness and challenging. He prods it. It's a project for him. So he just tools it.
Right.
And watching it work, and he allows you into the process of seeing the clothes be developed and the stylists, and he gives praise to everyone working on everything. And I remember that first show in Place Dauphine in the Triangle, where we did the bounce house and the benches. And we had made this Be Good Studios run by Lena and Nick. They do a lot of photography campaign, and they film the shows, and they're just brilliant creative directors. We worked on that show with them, and we worked on this we took over a library in that town square, and we made it a zine shop for some zines that Virgil worked on with Lena and Nick. It was just a friend-based thing. It was just a part of the show. So if you came to the show, you would go and get some free zines. And right in front of the zine shop was a trunk. Virgil placed the trunk. It was a green felt Louis trunk, I don't know, like $150,000 trunk or something. And it was covered in flowers. And there's a woman protecting it, standing next to it. And I just started talking to her because we look so naive, don't know how they other than the show and the production teams and stuff, we know how that, but the whole magic of Louis Vuitton runway show in the world that's being built, we don't know anything at that point. And she's talking, and I was like, yeah, this trunk is beautiful. And she's like, yes, I made it. I was like, oh, wow. And she goes, yeah, I've been making the trunks at Louis for 30 years or something.
Cool.
And I was like, wow. And she just looked at me, and it was like, I'm going to cry thinking about it, because she was like, yeah, Virgil is amazing. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, he just lets me do things. He trusts me. He has an idea, and he had this idea, and I just tried things, and he was like, that's amazing. Keep doing it. And that's Virgil. His quote is always, teamwork is dream work. It's like he's never veered from it. And working, again, it's the perfect example of process. Working on a project with Virgil in any capacity, especially these shows, it's an honor. It's a privilege. We're aware of it. It's magical. It's absolutely magical. And so there's no pressure. It's just freedom and true conversation and true collaboration. There's so many people now working on these shows with us. Every time we get on a phone call with Benji B in London, it's like friends reunited every time. How are you guys doing? What's going on? Oh my God, I miss you guys. What about this? What about this? What about this? Oh, I love what you were doing there. I can incorporate it into this thing, and doing it like that. Ping pong, tennis, back and forth like that forever. It's like school. And then the day that it films, or there's a show, and now it's all filming because of COVID, it's like a triumphant, it's like camp. It's like in this last show that we had the privilege of working on, it was just dripping in meaning. And so the result is just like watching it. And in COVID, we're watching it. We did an event in Paris for SS21, then we did a show in Shanghai, and then a show in Tokyo, and then we've done the show in Paris for FW21. And every one we're watching on a couch at Anna's house or at my house at 2 or 3 in the morning, live. And we're also on Zoom with the production crew watching the live stream like in the behind the scenes, and we're also just tuned into YouTube watching how everybody else is seeing it. And there hasn't been a single time where it's like we haven't broken down in tears. And and then he pulls other stunts. Like in SS21, Jeff and I were like, we should start sending him things that are like parts of our studio practice. Like I'm a painter, so like maybe I'll start making some pastels or whatever. So I sent some pastels, and then boom, they're in the collection. Walk down the runway on clothes. And I texted him and was like, bro, I'm speechless. Like, what? And he said, Pyrex Vision, which was his first label, which was about just taking something and making a t-shirt together. And he said, Pyrex Vision forever. Like, this is the mission, friends making things together. And he does this for and with everybody. I don't even know if I'm like supposed to talk about this kind of stuff, but like it's true and it's magical. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life, and maybe ever will. It's like when you watch these shows, when you watch what he's built, and how he's done it, how he's involved people, and the messages that are dripping, and which are his stories to tell, not mine. It's the best form of art I've ever seen, truly. So it's cool. It's absolutely cool. And the stuff looks great. So
that is incredible. That is really incredible. And I love it. And it's the side of things that people, especially with something like fashion and Louis Vuitton, I feel they don't think about and they're not privy to. They don't know about, and they don't care to know about either. And this is, I think, something you said earlier, that when you have something at that scale, massive scale, and publicity, it's going to be picked apart by thousands of people. But, they don't understand what goes into it, or the meaning behind what goes into it, perhaps.
You can only do what you can do. And I think you can illustrate those stories in whatever way you want. And you can give access to all those things. People are still going to get it wrong or not see all of it, and that's okay. But it's about, I think, the reverberating circle from the center. As long as the center is true and clear, and you're providing access to it, back to that conversation about branding, then that will radiate. Yeah, it will continue to radiate, and his effect and his truth is, as real as anybody else's. It's amazing, absolutely amazing.
Well, we burned through 2 hours pretty quick. This was incredible. I'm so glad that we got to have you on the show. And I hope that we can somehow meet in person, after everything's cooled down and whatever. Yeah.
I'll be vaccinated fully next week, so anytime.
We're getting ours in a few hours. The first dose, at least.
Well, thank you for the time, honestly, and asking really incredible questions and caring. And I think the work that you're doing with this show alone is extremely important. So thank you.
Cheers, man. Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you like what we're doing, then please support the show by leaving a review in the Apple Podcast app. You can also subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and find us on Spotify. You can subscribe on there. If you want to support us in other ways, then just send us a bag of cash. Send us a bag of gold with a big dollar sign on it.
Or soap, pasta. We take any type of donation.
Bag of gold or some soap.
Your choice.
Yeah.
We are also on most of the social platforms, Facebook and Instagram, and sometimes Twitter too. We're mostly active on Instagram, so if you want to, get a little heads up of what's coming out, or news, or what we are up to, check out our stories on there. You can also send us a DM if you want to react to any of our posts. We have a hotline if you have questions, guest recommendations, stories you want to share, or you want to react to an episode or something like that. Feel free to send a text message or leave a voicemail. The number is 213-222-6950.
Yeah, and I know it's been a while since we've done like a hotline message on the show, but we actually get a decent number of them, and a lot of them are these days are kind of private conversations, right. And it's been good. We've actually been able to kind of help out some people, and through these exchanges, learn something as well. So it's been fascinating. It's another aspect of this that's little bit more behind the scenes, but nonetheless important.
Yeah, we're so a life coach for architects. If anyone needs to.
It's not entirely inaccurate. All right, everybody. Did you mention social medias? I think you did.
I did,
Yeah,
but thank God you're not listening to me.
What else is there? We have a website.
We have a website. All of the episodes are there.
We have a dance video.
Dance video. Oh, I didn't know we released this.
Website, secondstudiopod.com. And thanks again for listening. It means a lot to us. And stay tuned for more. We have some pretty amazing guests coming out this summer. It's gonna be a hot summer, y'all.
Yeah, it's gonna be hot. Get those tank tops ready.
Okay.
And deodorant.
Well, okay, we'll talk to you again next week or sooner. Bye.
Bye-bye.